questionable tactics. Hee Jin, the controversial creator of NewJeans, has had quite the busy week in court fighting 3 major lawsuits. With accusations coming from a former employee and HYBE labels like BELIFT and Source music, is this the unraveling of her manipulative power plays? And are her dark truths finally catching up with her? Hi guys, Han here. If this isn't your first time with me, then welcome back. And if it is, hi, I'm Han. I'm a K-pop fan of almost 20 years and I've worked here in South Korea as a marketing expert in the K-pop industry. Recently on my channel, we've been covering the ongoing dispute between various parties involved in what we're calling ADOR Gate. And while I thought I would be taking a break from commentary this week, unfortunately, there were some pretty big major legal cases this week that I feel we need to cover. It's a new year, but Hee Jin is on her same old BS. And today we're going to be covering the mediation session between Hee Jin's side and an ex-ADOR employee, as well as the first hearings for the BELIFT and Source music lawsuits against Hee Jin. As always, sources will be linked down below in the description. I will admit this time I only included Korean sources because there were just too many to try and find English versions of, but you can pretty much translate them all in browser. So if you do want to read them in English, you can still do that. And honestly, I might do that moving forward because it's just a little bit easier for me. These videos take a very long time to prepare, so I hope you guys don't mind. Also, let's address any biases at the beginning. Personally, I'm indifferent to ADOR, HYBE and NewJeans, but I will make it very clear that I am very anti Hee Jin. I think she's a horrible person. I think she's a manipulative, narcissistic bitch, so she can kick rocks. But with all that being said, I try to give a commentary that is based in evidence, which is why I include the sources down in the description. And although I have my biases, just because something I say is in line with my bias doesn't mean it's not true. So let's use our own critical thinking skills to decipher what we think. And let's keep it friendly down in the comments as well. I know people have a lot of strong opinions, but let's be nice to one another. But if you clap at me, I will clap back. Let me just let you know. Today's video is going to be more of a summary of events anyway, so there's not going to be much of my own personal opinion, but I thought I'd just put that in disclaimer at the beginning so it doesn't come up later. Okay, without further ado, we're going to get started with the ex-ADOR employee's case. And now that we're deep enough in the video, I can actually say this is actually a sexual harassment case, which we'll be using SH as abbreviation moving forward. The employee is claiming that she faced SH due to the Vice President Lee Sang-woo, who was one of the 2 VPs who were working with Hee Jin right at the very beginning of this whole fiasco. And alongside the SH, she also claimed that she experienced workplace bullying before and after the fact. Now, I do want to put a slight trigger warning here. There is no physical assault in this story, but I know that this is still a somewhat sensitive topic for a lot of people. So I want to make it clear that when we get to the point where we're going to talk about what actually happened to her, I will play a sound and there will be a timestamp on screen for you to skip ahead to if you don't want to hear the details of what actually happened to her. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. I actually didn't cover this back when it originally happened because I didn't think it was going to be pertinent to the bigger case regarding ADOR Gate. Like, it's not really related to the audit that HYBE did and Hee Jin and all this kind of stuff. Although it is a good illustration of her character, I just didn't think it was worth bringing up such a sensitive and personal issue because I also feel like this employee didn't want her story to be this public as it is. However, with this and other things that have happened this week, I do think it started to become a little bit more relevant to the grand scheme of things. And I know it's something that you guys are going to be very interested in. So I thought I might as well make this video about the whole situation all at once so that we can one and done it and we don't have to keep bringing this up over again. So we're going to try and cover this today in a brief but thoughtful way. We're going to go through the timeline of events. We're going to talk about the results of the mediation session. And finally, we're going to talk about what the implications are in the wider ADOR Gate situation. So, starting with the timeline, the case that we're talking about all started right around March. This is March of 2024, by the way. And there's some key dates that happened. So on March 2nd, this employee, who we're going to refer to as employee B from now on. B for bad bitch, because she's fighting the power. Anyway, B handed in her notice that she was going to be quitting her job at ADOR. And then on March 6th, so 4 days later, she filed her complaint with ADOR and supposedly also with HYBE, or the process, it's one of two processes. She either filed with ADOR and HYBE separately, or she filed with ADOR, but as part of the process it has to go through to HYBE. It's not really clear which way it worked, but either way she filed her report along with evidence, this is also important, along with evidence against VP Hee Jin. And 10 days later, on March 16th, she received the results of this report that she had filed. And unfortunately, they had found that there was not substantial evidence, or that they didn't see much wrongdoing. And Lee was let off with just a warning, and that was it essentially. And then on March 21st, she had her last day and she quit her job. Throughout this whole situation, as far as I've seen, B never actually specified when the SH took place, but we do know that it took place in relation to a work dinner that she had with Lee and a client. And for those who need it, if this is your trigger warning, you can skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to hear the story, but we're just going to cover it very briefly now. The dinner consisted of 3 people, VP Lee, B, and a client who we can assume is third party from outside of HYBE, but we know that he is also another older man. So this is 2 older men and a younger woman. And B felt not only uncomfortable as like the only woman present, but she also felt that she had no reason to be at this dinner. It was a bit above her pay grade, because bearing in mind, VP is what, vice president. So this is like the deputy CEO. If it's a one-to-one meeting like that, like with no assistants, it's usually going to be a dinner meeting, as we know. It's usually going to be after work hours. It's usually going to be lots of drinking involved. And it's kind of like the unofficial talk before you do the actual business. So it's a lot less formal, but everybody's still kind of on edge because they know that really the purpose of this is business, right? And she was like, I don't really think I need to be here. And so she brought this up to VP Lee, who said something to the effect of, there's no fun in 2 old men meeting for dinner. A young woman will make things more interesting, which is absolutely vile. And I know some people are going to see that as a very light comment, but I think there's also like social context that we have to take into consideration. It is inappropriate regardless of culture, of like social norms. In the West, it's not appropriate. In the East, it's not appropriate. In Korea, it's not appropriate. But there's other things going on in Korea at this time that I think are relevant. Pre-COVID, these sorts of like, what can I say? Like work dinners are very common. They were actually very excessive. Like people could be, employees should I say, would be expected to attend these dinners like 2 to 3 times a week, if not more than that. And they're expected to drink copious amounts. They're expected to stay out super late into the evening, into the night, and entertain either their higher ups for favor in their own workplaces, or potential business partners to win contracts and deals and things like that. And one of the other things specifically about this was the kind of uncomfortable environment that was created for female employees, especially because, just like in the West, men do still tend to hold more high positions in companies, more managerial and executive positions than women, far more proportionately in Korea than even in the West. And it's not unknown that at these, like, imagine you're a young woman in your 20s. I don't know how old B is, but just imagine you're a young woman in your 20s and you're having dinner with a group of people where the majority of them are men in their 40s and 50s. They're drunk, they're overstepping boundaries, they're making comments about like, oh, you're too pretty to be single, or why aren't you married yet? If I was your husband, I'd take good, like, you know, that kind of creepy stuff. And then on top of this, when there's alcohol involved, people's inhibitions are not inhibited, right? So there are many cases of women being forced to drink and then finding themselves in precarious situations or being taken advantage of when they're not all there. And this is like a very, unfortunately, very common scenario in the past in Korea. And this kind of broke during COVID, where, of course, gatherings were not a thing. So for the longest time in Korea, you couldn't gather with more than 4 people. So if you think a manager, a client, and maximum like 2 people from each side. And then even then there was like curfew as well. You can say out past 10 p.m. and things like that, or restaurants couldn't be open past 10 p.m. So that kind of like everyday business dinner work culture really died out. And then at the same time during COVID, there was a big move with feminism like entering Korea in mass very strongly, and that brought with it its own pros and cons. But what it meant is that a lot of people kind of became aware of like, you can't just say whatever you want or do whatever you want anymore. And post-COVID now, people are far more sensitive to like gender issues and as a whole. Gender issues as a whole are like a big thing, like a hot topic in Korea right now. But like especially the treatment of women in the workplace, sexist comments and things like that are taken very seriously. And VP Lee's statement very clearly implies that B is only present at this dinner because she's a young woman. It's got nothing to do with her job, it's got nothing to do with her skills, not even a learning opportunity or a growth opportunity for her. It's simply an abuse of power. I think it's also good to point out that in Korea, they spent some time like refining the legal definitions of all these like assault related terms. So there's actually 3 levels in Korea. Sexual harassment, which is verbal, inappropriate comments, sexist comments or misogynistic comments, things like that are considered sexual harassment, which is usually punished by expulsion, like being fired or losing your position or transferred to like another branch or something like that. But it's very rarely punished legally. And this is the case that we're talking about. Like, this is a SH case specifically. And unfortunately, because there's no legal punishment and because there's no restraining orders or anything like that, it's very easy for the perpetrator to continue to harass the victim, not necessarily in terms of SH, but like just making their life miserable in general. And I've actually heard stories of this. Like, someone told me recently that they reported someone, he'd been fired, and then he'd shown up at work dinners to talk about that situation, talk about her to other people, even though he was fired from the job. Like, craziness. Anyway, the next level is sexual assault, SA, right? And this is considered like minor physical contact, like inappropriate brushing or like copping a feel, as we would call it, right? Like things like that would be considered SA. And they could have faced more serious legal punishment like fines, restraining orders. I doubt jail time in most cases, but obviously there's like a bit more there, and maybe even a payout to the victim. And then of course you've got sexual violence, which is the extreme, unconsensual, major physical contact and all those kind of things. And within those, like dubious consent and like statutory and all those kind of stuff are like included, right? And that's usually punished with jail time, but in my personal opinion, it's often far too short. I mean, look at Seungri and Burning Sun and all these guys. But anyway, that's just to give you the information. Those are like the 3 standards in Korea. So we're talking about the lowest one here. So B did what she could do, and that was filing the report. And it's alleged that Hee Jin actually did everything within her power to discredit and downplay this report, but this was not revealed to be until much later. So allegedly, as we know it, based on the news reports and things like that, what actually happened is that Hee Jin pretended to B's face that she was being a neutral mediator and investigating the situation, talking to VP Lee, getting his side, talking to B, getting her side, and then she would escalate to HYBE, which is like the process, and then HYBE would make the final decision. But what was actually happening allegedly was that she was from the moment B said that, hey, this happened, she was looking for ways to discredit her, slagging her off to other people behind her back, including VP Lee as well, which we'll got some evidence for that, so we'll talk about that, and downplaying it. And not only that, Hee Jin wrote a 18-page document calling the claims baseless and criticizing B as an employee, criticizing her work ethic, saying that she is just collecting wages, that she's not doing any real work. And she helped VP Lee to rewrite his statement, like as part of the investigation he had to write a statement saying what happened, helped him rewrite his statement, and then submitted her rewritten version to the official like HYBE investigation. B expressed how she was scared to go against someone who is so much higher than her in the company. Like, we don't know specifically what B's position was. I think they mentioned it was something in marketing, but I'm not sure. But obviously VP Lee is the vice president, like he's the deputy CEO, he's pretty high up there, and it's like, if there's anyone you don't want to piss off, it's the person who writes your paycheck, right? So it was quite a brave act for her to report, and I think that's actually reflected in the fact that she reported when she was already quitting, like she'd already given in her resignation, because staying in that environment could not be healthy, like there's no way you'd feel secure there. And she also mentioned that she had really respected Hee Jin as well, until she learned obviously about everything that was happening behind her back. All of this stuff happened in March, and things remained relatively under the table until July, where, and I'm not 100% sure this is where the leak came from, but this is the only thing I could find, was the story was broken publicly through likely the Dispatch expose, where they showed a bunch of Hee Jin's cacao messages after the injunction that Hee Jin won against HYBE. So you might remember in June, Hee Jin and HYBE went to court. Hee Jin had filed an injunction about the fact that she was, what's the word, inappropriately dismissed from ADOR, and the court ruled that while she had plotted things that would be damaging to HYBE and ADOR are different entities, and her loyalties are to ADOR, and as the ADOR CEO, she's fine, so therefore the injunction was carried through and they couldn't fire her at that time. During that court case, HYBE had presented a lot of her cacao messages as proof of her character, as proof of the things she'd been doing, and Dispatch then went and somewhat like recreated those same messages and posted them in this big expose. The messages are linked down below, and I'll probably show a few of them on screen. But amongst the many messages that were there were Hee Jin talking to VP Lee about employee B and about this case at the time that it was happening. So these messages were from March. And in these messages, she is absolutely ripping into B, calling her a bitch, calling her, like, in English we would say feminazi, because we're talking about like radical feminists, right? But in Korea, there's like feminist is used as like a derogatory term, and it literally means like misandrist, which obviously is not what the core of feminism is, but that's how it's perceived by a lot of the Korean public. She said in her messages that she hates feminists, she hates working with women, that B is so weak and pathetic and all this kind of stuff. And it's so ironic because literally just a few months prior, back in April, Hee Jin, like her whole image was being championed as like this underdog woman fighting against like the male executives who are above her in Haniverse. She's not a whole CEO, but that's how she's painting herself, like the poor mother of NewJeans fighting the HYBE dogs and the aggressive older men and this kind of stuff, right? And a lot of people at this point were still supporting her because she looked like she was fighting for women's rights in the workplace and for women to be respected. And obviously, even without knowing the background context to these messages, her saying all these things about another female employee, her saying this is the reason I hate working with women and this kind of stuff, went very against the image she had publicly painted for herself. And this is why I always say that if there's one thing this woman is good at, it's her actual fucking job, which is branding. Like, she really branded herself as like this superhero. And I tell you, I've met people who still think that to this day because they've never followed the case past that initial press conference. Following the leak, Hee Jin of course went to her social media, her Instagram mainly, to complain about the leaked cacao messages, saying that it was an invasion of her privacy and they were taken out of context. And she had her own cacao messages to share, messages between her and B. And she also shared them without consulting B first. And B also stated that the messages were taken out of context. Who would have thought? It's a problem when someone does it to Hee Jin, but when Hee Jin does it herself, it's fair game. It's fair game. So Hee Jin took to her Instagram, she posted these cacao messages, and actually the irony was, even when she was posting the cacao messages, she was still low-key kind of insulting B by saying like, oh, I was so good to her even though she was a shit employee, basically, and basically refuting everything that had been said. And B obviously saw all of this and felt like embarrassed. Mind you, B also would not have seen the negative messages about herself that Min Heejin had sent until this dispatch expose. So B was quite shocked by that. And then to see Min Heejin do the same thing she was complaining about, posting the messages without permission, sharing that on her Instagram, and also sharing B's personal information such as her salary, she felt very enraged by all of this, and she actually ended up making her own Instagram. Like, it was like a day later, but it was from July to August. It's now August. But she made her own Instagram, and she said that she wanted to give her own side of the story because she felt like none of the like press coverage was doing justice or fully covering all the details as she felt things had happened. And she also mentioned that, like, because Min Heejin had leaked her personal information, like her salary, it had actually made her transition into her new job difficult, because now people could put two and two together and be like, oh, you just quit ADOR back in March and you did this kind of job and you're now getting this salary in this company, which means you must have made a release as much in that, and so on and so forth. So all of this coming to light somewhat against her will, because mind you, she's not the person who approached Dispatch and said, like, hey, write a story about this. Dispatch posted the messages, people started being like, oh, what's this all about? Min Heejin posted her rebuttal, and that was like her B's dirty laundry was being aired against her will. And she even said in some of her later interviews that she felt like she'd been caught up in the battle between ADOR, at this time Min Heejin's ADOR, and HYBE, even though she was not trying to be involved in any of this. Mind you, she quit the company before the initial HYBE audit even happened. But as it's happening now, i.e. August, she was like, I can't let my name be dragged through the mud. So she did an interview with I can never say, JTBC? You know what I'm talking about. That one, the ones who broke into HYBE building. She did an interview with them where she gave her full side of the story. She did do it anonymously, you know, like the whole like dark shadow figure thing. But she gave her own story from her own words. I think this says a lot. The fact like she would come out of the shadows, something that she was dealing with personally and like privately, to now come into the limelight to talk about this, shows how important it is to her. None of us know if she was planning to take any legal action privately before this, but she hadn't at this point. And I think the fact that she did this now is a testament to how much like this her pride and her privacy. And I think it's probably a slightly older video now, but we've definitely spoken about like the importance of honor and reputation in Korea. So I can see her being like, I can't just let this slide, especially if this bitch is lying on my name, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that again gives B a little bit more authenticity, especially again bearing in mind that she's doing this at a time where the public sentiment is still very pro Min Heejin. Anyway, B comes out, she expressed her disgust at the things that Min Heejin said about her and sharing her personal information, and it's at this point that she actually files both a civil and criminal complaints for violation of the Labour Standards Act and Personal Information Protection Act for sharing false information against Min Heejin, with a penalty of 100 million won. Now you might ask, why is she only going after Min Heejin? She's not. She is actually still going after the VP as well, VP Lee Sang-woo, but it's a little bit different. In this case, she just reported him to the Ministry of Employment and Labour, which mind you is still like a legal entity, and they manage basically things that are related to like unfair labour practices, like not being paid, poor management, that kind of stuff. And actually the results for that will be coming out later this month, later in January, so we will find out what became of that. And he can be fined. I don't know if you can get jail time, but you can definitely be fined, and it's like a legal fine. So we'll find out what happens there. But in terms of Min Heejin, you have to remember that she's not filing her for the sexual harassment. She's filing her for publicly defaming her and not handling the case correctly in the first place, and also obviously sharing her personal information. And I think the fact that if she can prove that Min Heejin didn't handle the case correctly in the beginning, then I think that will actually give more credence to her report of Lee Sang-woo, because bearing in mind the company ruled that there wasn't sufficient evidence and therefore he got off scot-free. It would be kind of hard to prove that he did something wrong in the Ministry of Employment and Labour report, but if she can prove that Hee Jin was wrong, that should hopefully make the latter easier as well. Anyway, back to the timeline. Following her filing in August, in September the courts decided to move forward with the filing and placed a provisional seizure on one of the properties of Hee Jin to cover the cost of the 100 million won penalty if she is to lose this case. And it's actually this fact that I think is the most important thing in the grander ADOR gate situation. But we will come back to why that is at the end. Like I said, I just want to get through the full timeline and the results of the mediation first. So, following this, in November, the court recommended the case for mediation before they went to actual court. And that meeting took place this week on January 6th. In typical Hee Jin fashion, she didn't show up, which is something she does a lot. Like, Hee Jin only comes to things if she can speak, basically. She's like, if there's not a microphone, I don't have time to waste. Like, I've got things to do. And I think also her staying things out of turn has caused her problems in the past. So I think she learned from that. And since her second press conference when she won the first injunction, she's not actually addressed the public directly, except the Hyundai Card event. Everything else she's done has been through her lawyers or her PR agency. A tip that I think NewJeans should take out of her book. There's one thing they should learn from her. So nobody was really surprised that she didn't show up. But B did attend. There was a bit of confusion about that, but she confirmed on her IG story that, yeah, I did go to the court. So B attended, B's lawyers attended, and then Hee Jin's lawyers attended. And Hee Jin's lawyers made it very clear that they had zero intention of mediating anything, zero intention of settling anything, which was quite ironic because, well, not ironic, which was quite weird because B doesn't actually want 100 million won from Hee Jin. She just wants an apology, which is so little to ask for. And this, again, is why I feel like I really do believe B's case, because if this was like clout chasing, firstly, this is not going to look good for her. Like, she's going to be a social pariah because of taking this case as far as she's taking it. Like, people, the thing is, as much as people will admit that she's a victim, people will also see her as like liability and be like, well, she sued someone before, like, be careful what you say to her, you know, that kind of thing. And she can be very much ostracized for doing the right thing, even though she's the victim. So for her to take this far and be like, all I want is an apology, all I want is for you to turn around and say that I'm not a bad employee and that the things you said about me are not true and I'm ready to let this go, I feel that that speaks again more to her integrity and her authenticity in this case. But in order for this to be a legal case, you can't sue somebody for an apology. There has to be like a legal, like, what's the word, punishment, which is why there's this 100 million won fine. So I felt like this was a perfect opportunity for Hee Jin to just like put something on paper, give it to the girl and be like, okay, I apologize, like, leave me alone now. Because she's got bigger fish to fry. But whatever the case might be, as we talked about as well, there's this whole thing of like pride and honor and all this kind of stuff. Hee Jin is not bowing down to anybody. So her lawyers were like, hell no, we're not apologizing. And not only that, I do think to some extent this is kind of a war of attrition. Like, Hee Jin is using the second biggest law firm in Korea. I highly doubt this individual employee can afford a law firm that big. They didn't mention the law firm she's using, but I haven't heard of it before, so I can't give much. But the fact that I haven't heard of it should tell you something, I guess. Maybe Koreans would know it a bit better than I do, but regardless, it's not to the same level as Kim En-jang or Sejong, which is the number 1 and number 2, by the way. And I feel like, as well as a CEO who has like all these assets to burn, who has her like payout from her shares and all this kind of stuff, Hee Jin can afford to continue this legal battle longer than B likely can afford to. So I can see it being this thing of her just exhausting B's resources out of spite and then letting this case fizzle out, because never reaching a conclusion is better than admitting you were wrong. Basically, like in Korea, that's how it is. Like, we talked in my last video about how JYJ members, the members of TVXQ who left SM and SM, never actually reached a conclusion to that lawsuit. They just settled, because I think that's just the easiest way to deal with these kind of situations, because once you admit fault, that sticks with you, right? And again, when have we ever seen Min Hee Jin apologize for anything? All in all, whether you think B was truly a victim or not doesn't really matter, but I do hope there's no one who watching my video who does not think she's a victim, like, or who's downplaying the kind of experience she would have gone through. You might say it's just a comment, but there's social and like there's implications to those kind of things. And B did also mention that this case was just one of many situations where she felt she was harassed or targeted by Lee at work, and that Lee has done this to other people as well. So this is a pattern of behavior. This is like the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. And again, the whole point of her going after Min Hee Jin is the principle of not handling the case as she should have in her position as the CEO of ADOR, and sharing her personal information publicly, which is just not necessary in any case. But for what it's worth, I personally do very much believe B. Not because she's a enemy of Min Hee Jin, but because of what she's putting on the line to go through with this. Anyway, now that we've got the timeline out of the way and we know what happened at the mediation, all that's left to say is that in the future there will be an official court case. We don't know when that's going to be just yet, but they will be seeing each other in court and they will handle this through the legal means. But the bigger question for this here video is, how does this actually relate back to ADORgate? Because remember, I said I wasn't going to cover it if it wasn't relevant, right? Well, if you've been following this case on my channel, then you'll be well aware that we've spoken about Min Hee Jin's management takeover plans and how she wanted to remove ADOR or NewJeans out of HYBE and start her own company, and what that would involve, like what it would take to do that, right? And I'm sure you guys have also seen the Davo Link news that has been going crazy this week. And we know that she's been meeting investors. Like, it's her meeting investors that started this whole thing off, because they were the ones who told HYBE, right? In my last video, we also covered the Davo Link situation in a lot of detail from the Dispatch leak as well. So we know that Min Hee Jin is needing external funds to start her own business or to start her own label, whatever she's trying to do, right? We also know that one of the things that tipped off HYBE to what she was doing was her asking for the higher evaluation for her stock options, the 20x or the 30x or whatever she was asking for. So it was very obvious that she was trying to extract as much money as possible out of HYBE, and she quit once she knew that she wasn't actually going to be able to get that. And even with the stock options that she had, the money that she would have received is actually not enough to pay back Bang Seok the money he lent her to buy those stocks, because that loan would have incurred some sort of interest. In Korea, there's a rule that if you lend money, even personally, over a certain amount, you have to write a contract, and the borrower has to pay a certain level of interest. And by the calculations that various lawyers have done, the money Min Hee Jin would be getting for her stock options does not cover what she has to pay Bang Seok. So she actually lost money, basically, in this process. Well, her house being put on a provisionary seizure implies that she does not have enough cash to pay the 100 million won. There's some specific like criteria that have to be met for a provisional seizure to be placed on your assets in Korea, and one of those is a fear of your inability to pay if you are found guilty of what you're being charged with, right? So by the court putting a seizure on the asset, it stops her being able to liquidate it and then later claim that, oh, well, I don't have the money, so just consider me bankrupt and let me move on with my life, right? So the home that they seized, she brought back in 2011 for 387 million won. So a bit more than what she'll actually have to pay. But I want to say that if she brought that in 2011, that home, if she's kept it well, or she's renovated it or remodeled it or anything, that home is going to be worth significantly more now. Like housing prices in Korea, no joke. I can't give you an exact estimate, but what I can say is that the apartment that I live in now, when I was a student, would have had a deposit of around, I want to say like 2 million to 5 million won. It now has a deposit of 10 million won. And I know my rent. I know my rent is way too fucking high. So I can guarantee you that that house has at least doubled in value. So it's plenty of money still. If they do have to liquidate it to pay B, Min Hee Jin will probably still get a nice chunk of that money back. But if they're seizing her house because she doesn't have enough cash, If she doesn't have 100 million won in cash, I don't think she has enough money in cash to start a business, to start an entire K-pop company. Even a small scale one is going to take a lot more than 100 million won in investment. And that would also make sense as to why she was trying to get so much money out of HYBE, why she was trying to get investors like Javelink. And we also know that during her Hyundai card talk back in October, she mentioned how expensive all of this was. She'd actually tried to champion herself and be like, look, I'm losing so much to fight this case. She mentioned, I might even lose my house. And she said that back in October, she'd already spent 2.3 billion on legal fees. That was October, November, December. 3 months ago. So I'm sure she's racked up more bills, especially now because she's got all these lawsuits that are actively happening. Baby Bin just doesn't have any money, which leads us to question if NewJeans are successful in separating themselves from ADOR, how is Heejin going to be able to support them if she doesn't have money to support herself? All I'm saying is that I've been saying I don't think Heejin has any intention of taking care of NewJeans after they leave HYBE. And the more I learn about this woman, the more evidence that comes out, the more details we get, the more I am convinced that is the case. Because if she doesn't have money to start a business, she doesn't have money to start a company, there is very little she can do for them. Yeah, she can earn money, but mind you, if she hasn't got 10 million won after being on a 1 billion won salary for the last, when did she start working in HYBE? 2019? Well, they said that she got her billion salary from when she was in ADOR, so that's like 3 years. That's 3 billion won. She spent 2.3 billion on legal fees, and now this is in a house to pay off 100 million won. I don't think she's got money to start a company. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And that's even considering the fact she's gonna rack up more bills because of her ongoing cases with Source Music and BELIFT. Which, before we get into, I think this is the perfect time once again to ask you guys to like the video if you're enjoying so far and considering subscribing, especially if this is not your first video with me, because guys, I'm being real with you. I know a lot of you started watching me because of the NewJeans content. I appreciate it. I love you. I'm glad you're enjoying. I'm very happy to make these videos, but like 80% of you are not subscribed, and that's just rude. I'm not gonna lie, that's a little bit offensive. I'm a little bit sad about it. I'm trying really hard to take YouTube seriously this year and keep giving you guys enjoyable, informative, and sometimes inspirational content. It literally takes me hours to write these videos. It's taken me this entire day to research, script, and record this video. So I would really appreciate if you sub to show your support, because it means a lot to me. It will help my channel to grow, and it will mean that I can in future invest more time and prioritize this channel more. So please consider it. Thank you very much. Let's get back to the video. So jumping into the other legal battles that have been going on this week, on Thursday, July 10th, Heejin had 2, I believe, simultaneous hearings in lawsuits filed against her by BELIFT, the home of Islet, and Source Music, the home of LE SSERAFIM. We're going to go through each side one at a time and get into their claims. Once again, Heejin did not attend the hearings, although neither did the CEOs of BELIFT or Source Music, although I don't think they really need to, because bearing in mind Heejin is an individual, whereas these are companies, I don't think CEOs usually attend these kind of things. They just send their company lawyers, so that makes sense to me, but I feel like she should be there. However, I do also think her not attending is very much like an optics thing. The only time she's really put herself like in the limelight voluntarily in like a somewhat negative situation was when she went to the police station for questioning, which she claimed she did voluntarily, but then the police said no, we summoned her, and then she talked to us for like 8 hours or something. Maybe I'm exaggerating, I don't remember how many hours it was, but I remember them saying like she was talking and she just wouldn't shut up. Anyway, which is on brand anyway. But since then, even though she came out like smiling and all that kind of stuff, I think from that point on she knew like, I want to stay out of the limelight as much as possible, because ultimately, following that, the focus did start to shift to NewJeans. And we've already talked about how she's using NewJeans to cover her own issues, so I digress. Anyway, starting with Source Music. Back in July 2024, Source Music filed a lawsuit against Heejin for misinformation, obstruction of business, and insult, seeking 510 million won in damages for the things she said during her original April 29th press conference. I think, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure Hee Jin only needs to make 500 million won worth of legal damages for HYBE to have justification to end her shareholder agreement, which would basically overturn the ruling in her first injunction and put an end to the debate about her stock options, which she said she's going to sue HYBE about, but I don't know if she's actually done that yet. I haven't seen details on that, but I do think this is a somewhat coordinated move on HYBE's end, where all the companies going after her are going for more than the minimum they need to justify terminating her. It's a very minor thing, but I thought it's worth mentioning that I see what HYBE's doing. It is sneaky and it's worth mentioning. Of course, if we need a reminder of what Hee Jin actually said, and this is what was repeated by the lawyers, Hee Jin claimed that LE SSERAFIM were prioritized over NewJeans, and that's why NewJeans were debuted later. And Source Music refuted this, saying that firstly, LE SSERAFIM was never prioritized over NewJeans, and actually it was Hee Jin's own fault that NewJeans were delayed in their debut because she kept putting off the deadlines or postponing the deadlines for her branding work. And it was, I believe, I could have sworn that I saw a report somewhere, I couldn't find it, but I saw a report somewhere that she had not like done this branding work for like 8 months, and that's what led to their stuff being pushed back so far. And then after the 8 months she came back, she was like, you know what, let me just make my own company. And then she took the NewJeans girls to the new company, and that's why they debuted at the time that they did. Take that with a pinch of salt because I couldn't find a source, but I'm so sure I remember that being talked about. Anyway, in her press conference, Hee Jin also called Source Music thugs, damaging the company issue. I think that's such a petty claim, but they said insult, so that's the insult, basically. The Korean word she uses is 양아치. It's not really a word like that in English. Basically like gangsters. Like she's saying like they're a mob. They're not real like businessmen. This is all a front, basically. Source Music claimed that LE SSERAFIM had faced damages as a result of Hee Jin's claims, and they said that an advertisement contract was actually lost following her press conference. I think this is very, very important in this like grand scheme of things, because that is like a material example of a loss that they face, which will have some sort of like projected earnings or profits from that venture that they can be like, this justifies the price that we are suing for. So I think that's fantastic. And also, of course, Hee Jin claimed that she casted the NewJeans members. Source Music were like, that's objectively not true. They had actually cast Minji in 2018, which is a whole year before Hee Jin actually joined the big hit / HYBE sphere. And then Hani was recruited from a co-run audition event between HYBE and Source Music. So all of the members essentially had their contracts signed and pre-existing history with Source Music before Hee Jin ever became part of the NewJeans project, even when it was still under Source. And they also mentioned that like, we invested the time and energy and money to train these girls. That's why they could debut just 8 months after they entered it, like they were transferred to ADOR. Like we did all that. So you can't sit here and be like, I picked these girls. Of course, Hee Jin's side had plenty of things to say in response. So firstly, her side said that when Hee Jin says that she picked the NewJeans girls, she means that she was the one who selected them from the Source Music girls to go to ADOR, which in a way that's not wrong, because obviously we know that NewJeans was supposed to be 7 people before and now it's only 5, and those 5 are still there. So maybe she's saying that like, I picked the 5 that I wanted to keep and I threw the other 2 away, basically. But it's also ironic that she said that because technically her shaman picked the members. You may not remember, if you check out the dispatch messages, the ones with the same messages about employee B, there's messages in there about Hee Jin asking the shaman which members to keep and which members not to keep. So for her to say like, I handpicked them, it's like, did you or did your ghost buddy to keep? It's just petty. But like, Hee Jin also said that she had made ADOR the company because she believed it was for the benefit of NewJeans. So yes, she didn't necessarily meet all of her, she didn't admit to not meeting her deadlines, but she said that she was preoccupied with making ADOR for NewJeans because she felt like they weren't being treated well in Source Music. And she also said that Bang Hyuk, bearing in mind NewJeans was supposed to be like a collaboration project with Source Music and Bang Hyuk, she said that Bang Hyuk had personally told her that he couldn't handle the development of NewJeans, and that's why he needed her to take over that project, allegedly. And that was all in March 2021, a whole year and a bit before NewJeans actually debuted. So, I don't know. But I also think that doesn't really make sense because in her press conference, she said that LE SSERAFIM was prioritized because they were Bang Hyuk's project. But now she's saying that Bang Hyuk gave NewJeans to her because he couldn't do it. It's like, well, if he wanted to be part of NewJeans, he could have just not given it to her. Like, the arguments don't make logical sense because this is lies. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is not about my opinion. Let's stick to the facts. Of course, one of the other things that Heejin's side always has to bring up when it comes to talking about LE SSERAFIM and NewJeans is the fact that she was supposed to have the first HYBE girl group. And I do think it's worth mentioning that unless she has a written contract, I don't think it matters, even if he did say that. Like, even if Bang Hyuk did promise her that, the fact is, a verbal, like, agreement or promise is not the same as a business contract. And again, if it's to be believed that the delay in NewJeans' debut was because of Heejin, then what was he supposed to do? Like, not debut LE SSERAFIM because she wanted to go first? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's also worth mentioning as well that she was the one who decided not to do any promotional activities before the girls' debut. They literally just dropped a music video on the day of their debut with no prior promotions. All the promotions are decided by each individual label. That's something we know as a fact now after How Sweet came out on the same day as Right Place Wrong People by RM, right? So we know this for a fact that she is the one who made decisions regarding their promotion. So for her to use it as an excuse now to be like, look, we didn't have any time to prepare, we didn't have any time to promote because we had to give space to LE SSERAFIM, we know that's not true. Like, objectively, we know that's not true because we've seen proof. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the Source Music side. So moving over to BELIFT now, and remember BELIFT is between NewJeans and Islet, right? So I couldn't find the exact date that they filed their lawsuit against Heejin, but I do remember it being very, very close to the Source Music one. So we're going to say tentatively it was also July 2024. And BELIFT are suing for the exact same things: misinformation, obstruction of business, and insult in regards to Islet. However, they are seeking 2 billion won in damages, which, mind you, remember Heejin said she would spend 2.3 billion on legal fees? Girl. Of course, BELIFT claimed in their lawsuit that the statements by Heejin at the initial press conference were completely unfounded. Firstly, they said that Islet is not a copy of NewJeans, which, honestly, we haven't really talked about that on my channel, but I think you guys know where I'm going to stand on this. Like, I think it's like a no-brainer. According to BELIFT, Islet's concept is about reality versus super me amongst teenagers, like my real self and my dream self. And NewJeans' concept is about Y2K nostalgia. And it's arguably not even original. I mean, is NewJeans just the new version of the Mexican girl group Jeans? Question? Tell me what you think about this. Anyway, we also have seen like more detail on BELIFT's stance on this, as they even posted a public video showing firstly their original ideation for Islet, which was, mind you, submitted in July 2023, actually before a lot of the things that they were being accused of copying had even happened. And then on top of that, during that same video, they actually showed examples of where, for example, like dance moves, like this kind of thing, that NewJeans had done and they were accusing Islet of having copied, were already done by other girl groups. Like there was a compilation of like dance moves that they were complaining about that had been done by other groups before. And also I think they'd even added in things that like NewJeans side or Heejin side had not mentioned, but they were like, if you're going to accuse us of copying, then you need to explain all this first, please, because you didn't even invent the move that you're accusing us of copying from you. Like, make it make sense. The math is not mathing. BELIFT also pointed out that Heejin knew the kind of impact the claim she was making would have on public perception, and called her comments about Islet an intentional attack to ruin a group at their debut, like the most sensitive part of their career, right? As a result of the press conference, NewJeans fans actively attacked both Islet and Le Sserafim, and Islet saw the cancellation of a brand deal, I think it was, advertisement contract, as contracts plural, as well as a decrease in album sales, and also a decrease in the SNS followers, which means with this like a physical number we can see of like this many people were interested before the press conference, and then after this happened, this went down, i.e. those people turned their backs or stopped giving Islet a chance, whatever you want to say, right? So they have, again, these material examples of negative effects that they got from the press conference. And I remember there's also this very famous image of Wonhee, I believe that's her name, deleting comments during a Weverse live and then taking a break not long after, which is so sad for like such a young girl to already be dealing with that so early into the career. And I do, like, as a K-pop fan, I think we all know like how important that rookie period is to an idol. I really do feel sorry for the Islet girls, because I'm glad Magnetic was a banger. I'm glad it went like crazy viral, because it's what they deserved. Like, regardless of whether you think Islet is a copy of NewJeans or not, that doesn't take away from the actual hard work and like dedication that the Islet members themselves would have put into their debut. They didn't pick the song, they didn't pick the concept, you know what I mean? So it's very sad to think that they're going through so much so early for things that are completely out of their control, even if you do think that Islet is a copy of NewJeans, which personally I don't agree. Of course, Heejin had many things to say, and actually she filed a counterclaim. So back in July, when BELIFT filed the 2 billion won lawsuit against her, she filed a counterclaim for 5 billion against BELIFT and their managerial staff. I find it interesting that she didn't countersue for Source Music. Is that an admission of guilt? I don't know. But of course, she did also have things to say here. And when I say she, I mean her lawyers, by the way. The first thing that they had to say was that anything regarding Heejin's like intentions, like BELIFT calling it like an intentional targeting of Islet, they were like, anything regarding her intentions is speculation. So they're like, that's a baseless claim. They're also saying that other people had already started to draw the parallels between Islet and NewJeans, including the parents of NewJeans who had written their statements, right? But as we already know, the statement was edited and then submitted by Heejin. So how can we even say how much was truly the parent statement and how much was the things that she put in there? They also said that the reason she brought this public is because she, remember in the very first press conference, she claimed that the reason for the audit was because of her internal complaint about Islet being too similar to NewJeans. She had submitted that complaint, I believe, the month before, so March 2023, and it had been denied, and then the audit had happened, and then she was like, they did this audit as revenge for me writing that internal complaint, basically, which is, again, remember that Islet's concept document thingy was solidified in July 2023, and it was shared internally with all the executives. So all the other CEOs of all the other labels would have seen this document. It's not like she didn't have any idea who Islet were going to be and what kind of style they were going to have until they debuted, but she waited till after they debuted to file her complaint. Maybe she hadn't heard the song, but the song is not the only thing she was complaining about, right? Anyway, her lawyers also said that she had to make this public to defend herself from the audit, obviously, and to finally get an answer, like to demand clarification, as they said. Which, okay, let's just play devil's advocate for a second. Even if Islet is found to be a copy of NewJeans, even if, big if, in Korea, you can still be sued for defamation if you revealed something to the public that is not deemed necessary for the public to know. So even if we agree with Heejin that Islet is a copy of NewJeans, was it necessary for her to read them to filth in public? Question. And obviously Min Hee Jin's side will say, well, we did the right thing, we did the internal review, and we were met with a rejection. Well, you doing it in public doesn't mean you're not going to get the same answer. It just means there's going to be more damage in the process. And is that damage justified if ultimately the answer is still no? Anyway, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer. I'm just here to share the facts and to spark, again, critical thinking. Guys, let's think. And I know my plotting is not even. Don't come for me. Anyway. Can you guys tell I'm tired? It's actually 2:30. Anyway, Min Hee Jin's side wrapped up by saying that she just wanted to speak against copycat culture in K-pop and unfair practices between HYBE labels, and they submitted a 1,000-page document which supposedly holds all of their supporting evidence. Now, personally, I'm sure that at least 500 of those pages are just fluff. Again, I think this is this thing of like dragging things out for as long as possible, giving them like overloading them with too many points. Like Min Hee Jin is so good at misdirection, which is how we've got to ADOR versus NewJeans, which is how we've got to unraveling and Kakao messages and all this other shit that's just not relevant to the main management takeover accusation from HYBE at the very beginning of all of this. I think this document is once again another way of like overwhelming them with things that are not relevant, giving other things time to play out, time for her to find investors, time for her to set up her company, time for NewJeans to potentially sort out their situation and to be in a better place by the time that any final verdicts come out. Who knows? All I can say is that you can't copyright individual dance movements. Are you gonna sue me for doing this? I don't think so, you know? And ultimately, did any of this need to be public? Even if everything she's saying is true, did any of it need to be public? I think most of you guys can tell where I personally stand on this, but I'm interested to know what you guys think as well. Do you actually think she has any valid points in any of her lawsuits? And do you think she actually has a chance of winning any of her lawsuits? Because that's the most important thing, right? I unfortunately do think she has a chance of winning against the ADOR employee B, just for what I said, like the power imbalance financially and socially, and in case of the law firms. I feel like, again, she could just drag this out long enough that B literally could not afford to keep fighting it. In the case of the HYBE labels, if they can bring those like material examples of her causing them damages, if they can, like, BELIFT has already provided like the blueprint document for eyelet, so if they bring that up again, if they go point by point and show like all the dance moves existed before NewJeans, this is not relevant. And if Source Music has any proof of like the original timeline for NewJeans before Min Hee Jin caused the delays, I think they very much so can win this. It's just a matter of like how many like red herrings is Min Hee Jin's side gonna put out there. But I think also the good thing for HYBE labels is that eyelet and Seraphim are out there performing, promoting, touring, living their best lives. Min Hee Jin technically doesn't even have an artist at the moment, and NewJeans are now locked in like legal limbo for only God knows how long. So even if they don't win at court, they've kind of already won, if that makes sense. But again, that's just my opinion. What do y'all think? The next hearing for BELIFT will be March 7th, and the next hearing for Source Music will be March 14th. So you know I will be here to dissect and analyze the results when the time comes. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Check out the ADOR Gate playlist if you're not up to speed. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time. This has been Han for the Haniverse. Thanks for stopping by. Time for me to go to sleep. I'm so tired.